The radio drama that you are about to hear is one in a series created to mark Prince Edward Island's 150 years as a Canadian province. It is set in Summerside, the principal service center of Prince County. In the mid-1850s, the building of wooden ships along the deep-water shore frontage of Bedeque Bay gave rise to the settlement of Summerside. While the harbor was perfect for the launching of sailing ships, the marshy shoreline was not as conducive for settlement. Still, people flocked to the area for employment in the shipyards and to establish businesses and professions. It was a challenging endeavor to put down roots and tame the environment. Nature fought back against this human invasion of the shoreline. Her weapon of choice was heavy clay soil that turned to sucking mud when mixed with water. By 1873, settlers had still not figured out how to equal the playing field.
Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers. It is a lovely day to be out and about in the village.
If that is your true opinion, Mr. Johnson, you must have ingested more of the spring tonic than recommended on the label.
Well, perhaps you, Mrs. Rogers, should try another tablespoon of the excellent elixir to shake off the winter blues and get in the spirit of spring. What has you so riled up this morning? Surely not your husband, for a finer gentleman I have yet to meet.
Are you blind, Mr. Johnson? Do you not see the street is nothing but a mud bog? How are William and I to get across with our parcels and stay afoot? The only way we can ever do our shopping is thanks to the narrow wooden sidewalks that allow us to move from store to store along each side of the street. Trying to cross over is a nightmare. Cold as it might be, winter is far more favorable than the 3 remaining seasons that are filled with either mud or red dust that blows into every crevice of my house.
Oh, my dear wife takes terrible offense to the mud, but it is the reality of living in Summerside.
Yes, indeed. Summerside has justly earned its nickname of the Red Mud City. But there's no point in being angry. We just need to find ways around the problem. I find my fishing waders the best way to contend with the mud.
That might be fine for you, Mr. Johnson, but women's fashion does not lend itself to waders.
The condition of the streets is rather backwards for a place like Summerside that is so progressive in many ways. Just look at the number of shipyards running along the harbor, employing so many skilled men, and the fine retail establishments that line Water Street. They are the envy of other settlements, yet we have this confounded mud to contend with in the spring and during every rainstorm.
Too often the stores are forced to close because of mud. It is ridiculous.
Unfortunately, it is a sucking mud that can take down a grown man. Our children are not safe in it. But what is to be done when we have no municipal government and the island is all caught up in becoming the 7th province of Canada? They have no time for Summerside.
Is that a little anger I detect, Mr. Johnson? If a colonial politician got caught in the mud, there would be change, I can tell you. Good Lord, will you look at that? Mr. Alexander's cow has just done her business on the street. Cow manure mixed with mud.
There's plenty of horse dung in there as well. It's only to be expected since the animals are allowed to freely wander.
Well, Charles Ramsay's pigs were rolling around in the mud on Central Street yesterday, near the public well. They were having such a good time, I felt like joining them.
I question if women are bringing more than dirt into their homes on the hems of their skirts.
What do you mean, Mr. Johnson?
Well, could they be bringing home diseases to their children and husbands? Typhoid and diphtheria are problems for us.
Of course. Place the blame at the feet of women, as usual. You know Adam had a brain, right? But it was all Eve's fault?
Please, do not take offense where none is intended, Mrs. Rogers. It was simply a speculation on my part. I can take off my boots in the entrance of my home, whereas women do not have that alternative with their skirts.
It is food for thought.
If either of you looked closely, you might see the new styles keep the hemline just above the ground. But to beat the Summerside mud, they would have to be well above our knees, which I am sure neither of you would appreciate.
Bessie, you old cow, you get home. You can't be wandering about in the muddy streets. You'll be down with foot rot.
See what I mean about disease?
I do believe that poor cow is stuck solid.
George, how many times do you have to be told not to leave the gate open? This is the 4th time this week our Betsy has been stuck on Water Street.
Calm yourself, Myra. She's got the latch undone herself to look for a new patch of grass after the long winter.
Well, if you had cut a little more grass last summer, Betsy wouldn't be half starved and looking for more grass. She better not go off on her feet when she's ready to calve.
Oh, if it means the end of your nagging, woman, I'll cut twice the amount of grass this summer.
Oh, here we go. I've heard that line before. But when it comes time to actually work, it's a different story. How are we going to get Betsy out of this sucking mud?
The same as last time. I'll put on her halter, and you push at the hind end. Get over here now.
The hind end is all I've gotten my whole life. We are the laughing stock of Water Street at this moment, George Alexander. Come on, old girl, move. Are you pulling, George?
Yes, I am. Come on, you stubborn old girl. Move. Hey!
Now you went and did it, George. Both you and the cow are stuck. Oh, my God. Lye soap and the scrub brush ain't ever going to get the red out of my dress.
Or my long johns.
Don't move, you two, until I get the team by you. I can't risk slowing down and bogging the wagon. Keep it moving, Ted and Bill. Good boys. Keep one foot ahead of the other. You can make it through. That a boy, that a boy. What slop. I'm glad I didn't bring the mare to town. She'd have lost her head in this mess. I won't be back in Summerside until this dries up.
Well, look over there at Samuel McNeil. He walked right out of his boots, and his wool socks are covered in mud.
He can't pull them out. The mud might as well be cement.
And there's the newspaper boy making his rounds. The mud is right to the bottom of his bag. He'll be wading through mud for every drop-off. I hope he can stay on his feet, or he'll be out of his pay. His poor mother needs the meager income to help put food on the table.
Well, look who's a-coming along the sidewalk down that way. If it isn't Dorothea Lafergie and one of her high-brow daughters.
Goodness! What would take them out on a day like this, when the street is in such bad condition?
They're likely ordering another gown for the next party at the big house. Did you hear that at the last one they danced until the sun rose?
Good morning, Mr. Johnson, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers. The streets of Summerside are not at their best this morning.
No, they are not.
I would have thought your husband, as a colonial politician, might have addressed the issue, but apparently not.
I am surprised to see you out rather than using the delivery service, although how the poor cart men make it through this is beyond me.
We have fittings for new dresses we ordered for the party. We are hosting on July 1st to mark Prince Edward Island's entry into Canadian Confederation. Both of you will be receiving invitations.
Well, I'm not so sure about Confederation, what it will bring to this little island. I was content with the way things as they were, but I'm not one to pass up a good party. Thank you, Mrs. Lafergie.
I share Mr. Johnson's sentiment. Only time will tell if our politicians made a wise decision for the people. The missus and I would love to attend your party.
Let us hope the streets are both dry and dust-free.
Surely by July that will be the case. We must be off. It takes so much longer to do anything when every step must be taken with such care. I will talk with John about the matter.
That's all well and good if she talks to her husband, but I don't think that's going to solve it. Well, are you going to stand there all day, Mrs. Rogers, or are you going to try and cross?
I am building my courage, Mr. Johnson, to tackle those cart ruts. How long do you think it will take for some man to come up with the idea that building them up in the center and digging ditches on either side of them for the water to run off and collect in could perhaps solve our mud problem?
Why, my dear, that's a brilliant idea. How did you ever think of such a thing in your pretty little head?
That could work. Of course, it would have to be a man that takes the idea to government.
Fill your boots, Mr. Johnson. Fill your boots. Be careful, William. Don't drop that flour or tea.
Digging ditches and building up the center of the streets is what indeed did finally solve the mud problem in Summerside. Streets became passable most days, which greatly improved business and the social life in the town. Eventually, cement and asphalt meant that both mud and red dust blowing in the island breeze became non-issues for townspeople. However, by the late 20th century and into the current 21st century, with muddy streets long forgotten, Summerside residents were demanding ditches be infilled to make it easier to cut grass and to provide extra parking in a driveway. There is just no satisfying everyone.
The Red Mud City of 1873, presented by Wyatt Heritage Properties Incorporated. Narrator, Stuart Smith. Mr. Johnson, Josh Frins. Mrs. Rogers, Lisa Carbon. Mr. Rogers, Daniel McLeod. George Alexander, Thane Clark. Myra Alexander, Ann Farrell. Earl Kennedy, Richard Matthews. Mrs. LaFergie, Shelley Stetson. Foley's, Nathan Wiley, Jim Dixon, Scott McLeod. Musician, Alexandra Arsenault. Researcher, Jean McKay. Scriptwriter, Marlene Campbell. Recording engineer, Peter Gallant. Any errors in historical accuracy in the composition of the script are the responsibility of Wyatt Heritage Properties. This project has been supported by the Department of Canadian Heritage Building Communities through Arts and Heritage Program and the City of Summerside.